You talked about your case, the appeal against your rejection of your bail application. You indicated that it went all the way to the Supreme Court, right? Now let's talk about the events of August 15th, 1995, 1 year, 1 month after your detention.
Yes, I am in August 15, the prosecution withdrew the case against Mr. Keba Sise, who was the former Director General of NSS. For me, Pasal Ajahn, the former IG, and I, we resume our trips going to the magistrate court. If you allow me, I can read it.
Which paragraph are you referring to?
167.
Yes, please go ahead and read it. This is an important paragraph.
Yes. So Pasal Ajahn, the former Inspector General of Police, and I resume our trips to Banjul Magistrate Court to face charges in quoted alleged stealing. Lawyer Usainu Dabo joined the defense team as the counsel for Pasal Ajahn. The prosecution, eager to proceed with the case, called its first witness, Jonkunda Sise, police superintendent at the time. But in a sleight of hand, the prosecution skipped the 10 counts and began their examination with count number 11 against the former Inspector General of Police for abuse of office. ASP Lamin Jobate, the prosecutor, tried to tender certain documents as exhibits for the witness to vouch for in support of his evidence in chief. Each time, however, the defense counsel raised objection which set off a round of lawyerly wrangling over the law. But even to the layperson, mind would find the legal argument too complex to follow. It was obvious that ASP Jobate was a novice in court compared to the experience and the renowned defense counsel, lawyer Osman Silla and lawyer Usainu Dabo. They were just poking holes in every argument he made, and the magistrate ruled in favor of the defense each time. The prosecution applied for an adjournment to appeal the decisions of the magistrate court to the Supreme Court, and the magistrate accepted the application, and the court was adjourned to 15 September.
Which magistrate was this at this time?
This time we are still with Magistrate Chris Onya.
And the case was adjourned to 15 September, you said, right?
Yes.
Did you appear before that court on the appointed date, 15 September?
Yeah, the prosecution did not show up in court to prosecute with its case against us. We appeared, but they did not show up. Our lawyers were quite upset about not being notified about the absence and call it a delaying tactic on the part of the prosecution because they have no merit in the case. They argued that the court should either side the prosecution for contempt or dismiss the case altogether. The magistrate ruled to adjourn the case instead.
And this was already 1 year and 3 months in detention?
Yes, correct.
Do you recall the events of 30 December 1995?
Yes, that was the conclusion of Sana Sabali's court-martial. The conclusion of Sana Sabali's court-martial was easily reached, and the former vice chairman of the junta, was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 9 years in prison.
Did he remain in security wing number 1?
Yes, I think afterwards they took him to the main yard of the prisoners, but he didn't even stay there long. I think the tension was very high, and they brought him back to the security wing.
On that day, did you have any encounter with let me rephrase that. Do you know what happened to the colleagues of Sana Sabali with whom he used to come to the prison to conduct the tortures that he carried out on you and your colleagues?
I did mention that after they were arrested, some of their underlings were arrested. They were in prison. All the people charged with Sana Sabali, detained with Sana Sabali, it was only Sana Sabali who was charged and court-martialed.
Were they eventually convicted?
No, they were never charged.
Do you know for how long they were in detention?
Well, I don't know. At some point, some of them were released in batches. Yeah.
Do you know a person called Usman Baji?
I know Usman Baji. He was a gendarmerie officer trained in France and Morocco, and would later become an interior minister under the Judgement government.
Do you know if anything happened to him at that time in 1995?
Yeah, he was also one of the detainees. They did detain him after they were arrested, Sabali and Haidara. Him, Valentine, and also Suso, and also Njai, the guys who were torturing me. They were also detained with Haidara among that group.
When you said Njai, who are you referring to?
Private Njai, who was the orderly to Sana Sabali, and Suso, what they believe was the orderly to Sadibu Haidara.
Do you recall what was his rank?
Suso was a gendarme, which is like equivalent of a private in the army.
In your description of the torture, you seem to have had an encounter with Private Njai. Do you recall that?
Yes, I did explain and testify. I told you after the mock execution, firing the shot, he was insulting me, pushing me, and then crawl up to the cell. Yeah.
Was he pointing his gun at you by that gesture? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
When he was detained, did you have the chance to see him in the prison?
Yes, I must have seen him. I must have seen him.
Did you by any chance have a conversation with him?
Yes, but I can't recall now unless you refer me to my statement, what I said.
No, that's not mentioned in the statement.
Yeah, because
so
I only saw him after he was released. And then he came to me and we spoke, and he apologized and felt bad.
What did he apologize for?
Well, for what I've just described.
Which was?
Which, I mean, they came there, insulting me, pointing gun after the mock execution. Yeah.
Yes, so now let's talk about January 22nd, 1996 in your diary.
Yeah, 22nd January 1996, we marked the coming of the new year. We were still in the doldrums like the previous one. We had only two things to do: wait for the unknown and hope for a pleasant surprise. At that time, the holy month of Ramadan started, and we all began observing fasts with intensive prayers. We started reading the Holy Quran on a daily basis. And by now, my reading and understanding of the Holy Quran was quite improved and quite impressed.
But for the year that had just ended, I mean, you had testified earlier that during certain important events, like Tobaski, Christmas, and so on, the then President Jawara used to release prisoners. And you also testified that your first Tobaski in prison, Jame released some officers. Samsudin Sar, Nur Cham, and one other person, Turo Jaune. And on 30 December, or the end of the year 1995, what happened? Were any of your colleagues released?
Yes, I think that was the release of Dr. Njai and Mbalo Seidi Khan, who was a Zandam, and Cadet Superintendent Abujang.
And these people, were they ever tried for any crimes?
No, they were not tried for any crime.
Do you know for how long Major Njai, Malik Njai, was in detention before his release?
Well, he was there a long time. At least starting with us, maybe around 27 or 28 July. He came just a few days after we came. So until that time, he was under detention.
And he was released at the end of December 1995?
30th December 1995.
And that would have been about 1 year, 5 months in detention?
Correct.
So, at this time, what happened to RSM Jeng? If you can remember.
I think if I remember correctly, RSM Jeng was at the hospital, and I think, let me just check. Okay, we also later, because RSM Jeng was now at RVH for quite a bit, and he was also among the people released. We later learned that he was released that day.
So you didn't see him again in the prison? He's not been brought back to the prison from hospital?
No.
So take us to events of February 1996, Independence Day.
February 18, 1996 was the 31st independent anniversary of the Gambia. And this day was the end of the holy month of Ramadan. This is on the 19th, was the holy day of Ramadan. So we have been hopeful that some of us would be released again, you know, with the same procedure, that there might be some releasing. But to our huge disappointment, these two consecutive opportunities also passed us by. And the then chairman decided to pardon only the convicted prisoners and and keeping us there, the remaining detainees.
And you were first charged before the magistrate's court, I think it was Canifing, on 13 March 1995. 1 year thereafter, what happened?
March would be 1 year I was charged. The case was, the proceedings remained stuck and in its initial limbo. The prosecution had still not produced any witness to testify, and Magistrate Chris Onya still remain reluctant to either pressure the prosecution to produce witnesses to resume the case or dismiss it altogether. Since no rule of law prevailed in post-coup Gambia, we were kept in a judicial black hole.
Your description of events, according to your diary, contained in paragraph 175, is a bit interesting. Could you kindly read that out, please?
Yeah, I said after the prosecutor filed for an adjournment, the latest in an endless stream of applications at every session for more time to assemble his witnesses, I reached the limit of my patience. And I challenged Magistrate Onya for deferring too much, for too long, to the delaying tactics of the prosecution. The prosecution I knew, I protested beyond all reasonable doubt that the charges were baseless and merited no hearing. We were held in an unlawful detention, condemned both nationally and internationally. I added that only appearance of the justification the junta was using to keep us in prison seemed to be this to drag on.
Do you read the rest verbatim, please?
Then Magistrate Onya just made a that just said Nelson Mandela stayed in prison for 27 years. Magistrate Onya said, and later became president of South Africa. And who knows whether one day one of you will become president of the Gambia. And you know, I thought that this was a very patronizing remark, and shared the contempt it stirred in the public gallery. Beyond that, I meant nothing to me, especially to my utmost immediate concern for a resolution to this legal purgatory. I was not a politician and had no ambition of becoming a president. In raising this concern to the bench in an open hearing, I was quite aware of the potential backlash from the junta. The zero tolerance of the ruling council for anything that had the appearance of criticism of its iron fist rule was there for all to see. And even though my protest was primarily directed at the magistrate for being invertebrate with the dilly-dallying prosecutor, I presumed that the junta would take it personally. But my outrage at the gross injustice and assault on our rights and dignities dwarfed all lingering misgiving that counsel caution and silence. However, I gave a second thought to the extent it might invite undue consequences to my fellow detainee defendants when I saw the next day's edition of The Point. At that time, the Point was a critical independent newspaper, ran a front story, page complete with my photo under the headline, Chongan demands to know why the prosecution keeps on absenting. And I think I had a newspaper of it.
At the end of the day, we would bring in all those newspapers and put them together at once. We don't want to go through the monotony of admitting documents at every point. So
I hasten to add, when I went back at mile 2, I told Sri Gomez, you better get another blanket because of my outburst at the magistrate court, because I knew that probably there might be a backlash.
Why would a blanket be needed?
Well, I was just telling him, preparing him psychologically to tell him you need another blanket on top of the plank because we'll be staying here long with what I have said.
Now, take us to 20 March 1996. What happened?
Yes. On 20 March 1996, the junta weighed in on my exchange with the magistrate. Fortunately for me and my fellow defendants, the junta had an entire different take on it, which I inexplicably overlooked. Magistrate Chris Onia was quietly transferred from Banjul to Carnifing Magistrate Court and thus removed from presiding over our trial. With the help of hindsight, it became obvious that my moment was negligible to the absolute rulers in light of the magistrate's lame comparison of my detention to the 27-year imprisonment of no less an icon than Nelson Mandela. The comparison ran on a parallel interpretation. Firstly, since Mandela was unjustly imprisoned, then I too was being unjustly detained, albeit on an infinite scale. Secondly, and I believe this was more biting and offensive to the junta, than the implication of apartheid, as in magistrate case, to the injustice. So I was being subject to draw comparable attributes of the unlawful order the junta too was wielding over us, the detainees in particular, and the nation at large.
So your belief is that your exchange with the magistrate, who thought that your detention, compared to that of Mandela, who was incarcerated for 27 years, and he later on became president of South Africa, you think that statement wasn't received lightly by the junta, is that right?
Yes, that's what I believe, because he was immediately transferred.
Would you say that such was the modus operandi of the junta at the time? You say something they don't like, you are transferred, or some other action taken?
Well, that was the starting point of what has become very clear, which every Gambian knows what has happened with the judiciary afterwards.
Now, to which magistrate was the case transferred after Onya?
So our case was then transferred to another magistrate who also happened to be a Nigerian. She had been a principal magistrate at the Banjul Magistrate Court for some years now. I think it was Oga Jaffu, if I remember. And for reasons unexplained to us, she declined to preside over our trial. And as a result, our case was assigned to Bori Ture.
Mr. Chairman, it's 5 minutes to the first break. Perhaps maybe you want to take over from here. Commissioners may have questions.
Thank you very much. Actually, you were time conscious in that word. I was just about to intervene to remind you that we have 5 minutes. And if you finish your line of questioning at the moment of those commissioners, maybe they have some questions before we break up for 30 minutes. Yes, Anna, please.
Commissioner Anna Jones. Mr. Chongan, is it my understanding, please correct me, that the IG Pasala Jang left on board the ship with the former President Jawara?
Yes, correctly.
Okay, I want to refer you back to paragraph 167. I think there's a missing link as to his return, because you mentioned that both of you had to resume your trips to Banjul. So could you please shed more light as to when he returned back to Gambia? 167, please. Could you just shed more light as to when he returned back to Gambia after leaving with former President Jawara?
Microphone.
No, he returned back in 1994, just afterwards. He didn't stay long in Senegal. Then in my testimony, I did explain that we were arrested together and taken to Mile 2 on that Monday.
Just wanted it for the record. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you. Carr, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Carr. I wanted to ask you a question yesterday. For one reason or the other, it escaped my mind. I want to take you back to when your wife saw you for the first time in 7 months. What was her reaction?
Well, it's obvious. It's obvious that she will be distraught. That you know, I was in prison, in my haggardness, my clothes, and my shabbiness. I mean, it's a very sad situation. Yeah.
Thank you. Imam Jallo, please.
Imam Usainu Jallo, Commissioner. Mr. Chongan, I know it's very difficult for you. How do you feel after you had realized that? After you had realized that some of your top officers in the forces had joined the president and left the country to nobody. What did you really feel? And right now, after so many years, what do you feel?
Well, at the time, to be brutally honest, I was very angry. But now I'm not angry, because at the time I was very angry. But now I'm not angry. I've moved on. You know, I'm happy I'm alive. I could have been dead 24 years ago, and maybe they would have forgotten me, and nobody would say the story. So I'm grateful to Allah to be here. That's more important. Whatever an individual does, you take responsibility for it.
Imam Abdurrahman Si man maa ngay wax ne soo gisee seen mbir mi jafe-jafe mu yàgga seen attakat yi ñoom mu ngi mel ni dañ doon seet lu nekk Yaya Jammeh moo tax atte bi yàgga bañ leen atte te loolu moom rafetut parce que nit moom su la indilalee wakam war nga seet lu ci mën a ne nga atte ko mu jeex moo taxoon jafe-jafe yi ngeen yàggee noonu waaye su fekkente noonu jaaraloon nañ ko ci yoon atte ko atte bi jeex da ngeen doon am seen ndam wala ngeen am seen jafe-jafe waaye atte bi daal xam naa ne ñoom ñi doon atte daal man dama gis ne daal ñoom lu nekk nguur gi moom lañ toppoon toppuloon seen liggéey.
Yes, that was the case, because there were two issues here. Number one, there was no case. And number two, the magistrate was afraid to dismiss the case. So they just leave it like that. But the good thing for us, going to the court also our escape, so that we can see our family. They will come to the courthouse. So there was also a little bit good thing in it, or else maybe we would just have been in prison. We would not even go out.
Commissioner Bojang.
I am Commissioner Bojang. Mr. Chongan, you said when you heard of your fellow prisoners' release, you thought otherwise, that you may be the last person of releasing. Why did you think so?
Well, because, as I said before, there are a number of reasons. I was one of the most senior officers. I resisted them in the coup. And Yaya Jammeh was my neighbor. We give him food, we give him everything, and he can lock me up. So I knew, you know, I'm a soldier. You know, I was prepared psychologically and mentally that I will stay very long because of what I did. So I was prepared. It was very difficult, but I knew, because maybe you don't understand military, because I was very senior. So I knew the junior ones will be going. That's why we stayed there until the end, until the new constitution came into force.
Bishop, please. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, please.
And again, don't you think that it's because of your forced firing against them?
Yeah, that's what I said. That's what I said. That's why I said the resistance. Yes. So I knew that. So I knew I was in deep trouble. It's only God can take me out.
Bishop, you have the floor, please.
Chairman, Commissioner James Odiko, Mr. Chongan, apart from the provisions that were brought in by your family members, were they allowed to bring you any change of raiment, clothing?
No, there's no change of clothing. You always wash. You just wash your trouser, you know. They did allow us some time at the beginning to bring us a little bit of clothing, but me, I was unlucky. When we were transferred to security wing number 1, you know, I lose. Then eventually I had my trouser. On maybe the other clothes I had, I don't know where they kept it. You know, in Africa, when they keep somebody, admired to the rats and everything. So the rats can even eat the clothes, who knows? Yeah.
You were talking about the transfer of your case from Mr. Onya, who likened you to Nelson Mandela. And that evoked something in the junta, necessitating the transfer of the case to some other magistrate. You also indicated that it was initially transferred to Principal Magistrate Ogajafo, who declined to handle the case, and it was thereafter transferred to Mr. Boriture. Does that encapsulate what you said before the break?
Yes, although I just want to clarify, Magistrate comparing me to the great Mandela, I think he was being sarcastic rather than meaning it. I'm too way small for that. Okay.
It may have never been perceived or received in that regard, but nonetheless, the repercussions of his statements were there for all to see. Is that right?
Correct, Counsel.
Now, your case is before Magistrate Mr. Boriture. This was in March, according to your diary, March 28, 1996, correct? Can you tell us what happened before the Magistrate Boriture when you appeared on the 28th of March, specifically referring to paragraph 177 of your statement, page 55?
Yes, we appeared before this young Gambian magistrate at the time, Boriture, and the courtroom was full to capacity with our families, friends, fellow citizens, because by now our case has captured the attention of the nation, because everybody was seeing a pattern that the junta had some interest in this case. So then the case, okay, as I said, the case captured the attention of the nation. So the High Court had already ruled on the prosecution's appeal to tender documents the defense has objected to during Superintendent Jonkunda Sise's evidence in chief. And the higher court upheld Onia's ruling in favor of the defense counsel. If you recall, I did explain the legal tussle they had until Onia ruled in favor of the defense, and the prosecution appealed, and that appeal was dismissed. So once again, we are here with everybody present. The prosecution called for another adjournment on the familiar refrain that its witnesses couldn't appear in court for days. Our lawyers then mounted a vehement objection to adjourn the trial. They protested that the prosecution must end its orchestrated delays and assume its burden of proof by producing witnesses to the court. And they quoted the famous dicta saying, "Justice delayed, justice denied." They quoted the old room. So in his ruling, Magistrate Turin granted the adjournment, but he gave a very firm warning to the prosecution to bring the witnesses at the next sitting. He made it clear that the case would proceed, even if the prosecution failed to do so.
At this stage, you have already been in detention for 1 year and 1 month. Is that right? I mean, excuse me, I meant to say that your trial had started 1 year and 1 month ago.
Okay, that's, yes, you are right, for the trial, yes. Yeah.
And up to this moment, only one witness was called in relation to count 11 of the charge, which had nothing to do with you.
Correct. It was for abuse of office for the former IG, yeah.
And even at this stage, all the documents the prosecution attempted to tender through this witness were rejected, and this rejection was upheld by the by the next appellate court.
Correct.
And at this stage, you're saying successive applications for adjournment had been made and granted by the previous magistrate, but this time Mr. Ture gave the warning for the final adjournment. Is that correct?
Yes.
When was the next adjourn date, according to your diary?
The next adjourn date was the 10 April, 1996.
What happened on that date?
We appeared before Magistrate Bori Ture for the second time, and as usual, the court was full to capacity. Some members of the public stood outside. There was a real anticipation for some form of action on this day. Either the prosecution would finally end the dithering and proceed with the case, or the magistrate would follow through on his warning to the prosecution when we appeared before. So the defense lawyers came fully prepared and determined. This time there was Miss Ida Drame was now representing Pasala Jang, Mr. Pap Chayasin Seka for ASP Diba, and Mr. Lawyer Usman Silla was representing me. After the case was called, the police prosecutor again, Mr. ASP Lamin Jobate, stood up and pleaded for another adjournment.
How was it received this time by the defense?
Well, the defense would insist that we have to proceed, and also they reminded the magistrate that the last time the case has to proceed.
Did Mr. Ture, did the defense make any application before Magistrate Ture?
Yes, the defense, without missing a bit, they made an application for the dismissal of the case.
Did the magistrate make a decision on that application?
Yes. Then Magistrate Bori Ture, I think, if I remember right, I just adjourned for a few time and then came back and made a judgment, which is in my statement. And the judgment was he acquitted and discharged us.
In your statement, specifically paragraph 180, you quoted the contents of the decision of the magistrate. Do you remember that?
Yes, I quoted it. And I have a newspaper which I kept, for which I have here.
Could you, on this occasion, produce the newspaper so that the commission can see it?
Hold on. Now, I might need some help because I don't know which one. Okay, it's here.
Yes, yes, pass it on, please.
This was the point, huh? And this was the observer, yeah.
Pass it around quickly, and then we send it back to him to just read the headlines. And Mr. Chonga, these are the original newspaper articles, right?
Correct, Counsel.
Mr. Chonga,
Counsel, you may continue, please.
could you take a look at the first newspaper in your possession? Which newspaper is that? Could you read out the headline of the article that concerned your case?
Mic, please.
Microphone.
Sorry. Yes, it reads, former Inspector General of Police and others acquitted as magistrate struck out without cause charges against them. And there's a photograph of myself and Pasala Jang.
What was the date of this newspaper?
The date of this newspaper was Monday, 15 April.
Let's go to the next one. What year? Thank you.
1996.
Let's go to the next newspaper.
This is the Observer, and
of which date?
Of 15 April 1996. And it also says Magistrate Court strikes out case against ex-IGP and others, again with my photograph and that of the former IG.
Mr. Chairman, at the end of his testimony, we would ask that all these documents be included in the record. You can see already how time-consuming it is to pass documents to all members of the Commission for inspection. So if we have to do that for each document or each material we need to present as evidence, we'd probably be spending 5-10 years here. So we would ask for this abridged procedure where we put them all in bulk together at the end of the session or at the end of a witness's testimony, bearing in mind, of course, that this is not a trial and that we are not bound by the ordinary rules of procedure that you would have in the courts, and that the Commission is the master of its own procedure. This is a truth-seeking mission and not a trial, so we can have the luxury to do that. And in any case, these are not materials that anyone would contest. So if you allow us, we would proceed accordingly.
Did you say 5 to 10 years will be here? If you did say that, we don't have money for that. So no, understood. Your point is understood, well taken. We may proceed accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chongan, in your statement, you provided the details of the judgment of Mr. Turin in paragraph 180. Can you read it out, please, and slowly, bearing in mind that the interpreters would have to interpret everything that you say?
I start quoting Magistrate Boriture's judgment. He said, the issue to be determined by this ruling is whether the application by Ms. Ida Drame for the case to be dismissed in the face of the prosecution's apparent refusal to continue should be granted. Mr. Seka also urges the court to dismiss the case for want of prosecution, supported by defense counsel Mr. Silla and Ms. Drame's application. This case was previously before His Worship Onya. In the course of the trial, certain rulings were made as regard to certain documents, which the prosecution had applied to tender. Unfortunately, however, a ruling was made to the effect that they be rejected, as a result of which decision the prosecution filed an application before the Supreme Court for the ruling, His Worship Onya, to be reviewed. It is interesting to note that the charge sheet in this particular case entailed 12 counts against the 3 accused persons. It is further interesting to note that the Supreme Court has handed down its decision on the said ruling on Wednesday, the 3rd of April. This case has since been dragging on. The case, since the ruling was handed down, adjourned for 28 March 1996. It was further adjourned to the 8th of April for hearing. Hearing notices have been sent to all lawyers involved in this case and to landed ASP Jobate to the effect that the case was adjourned to today, 10 April for hearing. Of course, Mr. Jobate knew that the major cause of delay in the pending application for the review before the Chief Justice was over. In fact, he furnished the court with a copy of the said ruling. What the court is set down for today is business, i.e. hearing this matter. There is no reason for any further delay, and in fact, Mr. Jabate, when asked to proceed, only said, I quote, "I cannot proceed, I don't have any of my witnesses here," end of quote. Of course, it is known to landed ASP Jabate that he was supposed to bring his witnesses to court today. Sufficient time has been given to him to do so. Despite the sufficiency of time, he has come without them, and he has not furnished the court with any explanation as to their absence. Adjournment as a matter of law is a matter of discretion to the court. It is not a right. However, the court, in the interest of justice of the case, would have to regard the convenience of both parties, as well as their respective counsels. The defense lawyers in this case have reiterated their willingness to continue the case. But landed ASP Jobate has emphatically refused to comply with any reasonable or justifiable explanation. Mere absence of the witnesses in this matter does not deny the court the opportunity to proceed with the case. The prosecution could have made an application to amend the charge sheet as directed by the Supreme Court. This would have pictured landed ASP Jobate as a very diligent and hardworking counsel. And that would have helped the court as well. But counsel's blank statement that he doesn't want to proceed is an insult on the dignity of the court. His behavior is contemptible. It does not conform to the norms and ethics well respected at the bar. Moreover, it has put the prosecution in this unfortunate situation of refusing to proceed with this case. This is a clear case of want of prosecution. Section 162 of the Criminal Procedure Code supports Mr. Seka's position that adjournments are discretionary. Where any party in any case can proceed, it will be an abuse of the process of the court to adjourn merely for adjournment's sake. It is a common practice in this jurisdiction that the case be struck out where a party has been given all reasonable opportunities to proceed with its case, but refused to do so. Judicial time is precious. Mr. Jabate could have made his application for an amendment in preparation for the next sitting. His refusal to do so shows clearly that he wants to hold the court to ransom. I hereby order that the application by the landed counsel for the first accused, Ms. Ida Drame, which application has been supported by Mr. Seka and Mr. Silla, be granted. I hereby grant it, and the case is accordingly struck out without cause. Accused persons, however, to be remanded in detention at Mildwood Prison since they are security detainees. End of quote.
How did you feel when you heard this decision?
I was very elated, and I was particularly struck how brave Magistrate Turin was at that time for braving up to the junta, because he clearly knew that the case was the case would never proceed. They had no evidence. It was just a fishing expedition and an abuse of process.
Yes, proceed. You said this was a courageous decision. Why did you think so?
Well, Counsel, you've seen how the previous magistrates, they were just adjourning the case. They were just adjourning the case. And you have to capture the context then. Remember, we were in military rule. You know, he is a brave man because he would have put himself in harm's way. So I think he really had guts.
Did the junta take this decision lightly?
No, actually, when I was at the box, when he discharged us, I just shook my head and I spoke to one of my co-accused. I say, I doubt this guy will survive. And the following day, all our celebration was stunted. Magistrate Turin was dismissed.
Dismissed from what?
Well, he was a magistrate. They dismissed him. I think I have yes, I have the newspaper here. Magistrate Bori Ture Sak.
What newspaper is that?
This is Observer of the 16 April 1996.
Would you produce that to the commission as well? Do you have any other newspaper on the same subject?
Yes. I'm just giving him, and then I'll explain the chronology. One is when he was reinstated, and also we are immediately charged again. So
we would come to that.
yeah, but I don't.
Yes, we would come to that. In the meantime, I want you to explain, if you know, how the judiciary responded to Mr. Toure's judgment. You told us that he was sacked from his job, and we have seen the newspaper. That aside, do you know if the judiciary had reacted or had taken steps to deal with Mr. Toure's decision or his judgment apart from sacking him?
Yes, because Mr. Ture, in open court, acquitted and discharged us. And, you know, people might argue legally whether it's right or it's not right, but afterwards, the bench and the bar were outraged. And at that time, it was that infamous justice who was the Chief Justice, Al-Ghali. You remember Al-Ghali Commission? I think, yeah, Al-Ghali was the Chief Justice. So, because I know this, because lawyer Osman Silla at the time told me that this is in open court. But afterwards, it was changed to that it was struck out. And then Magistrate Boriture is reinstated again. But he...
What was changed?
Well, the judgment was changed from acquit and discharge to struck out, to just what I read. Yeah.
So you are telling us that in open court, you are acquitted and discharged?
Yes.
And later on, that judgment was changed, and the disposition was that the case was struck out.
Correct.
Do you know how that was received by the Bar Association and other people interested in the law?
Well, at the time, it was lawyer Usman Silla who explained. He was very angry that you cannot change a judgment that was done in open court. The right procedure, even if the magistrate was heir in law, they should have appealed the judgment so that it could be corrected properly.
What was the reaction or the response to Mr. Ture's dismissal?
There was outrage from the lawyers, you know, both the private practice and the bench. There was outrage about this at the time.
Do you know how that outrage or how the issue of Mr. Ture's dismissal was subsequently handled?
Yes, as I just explained, that this judgment was changed from acquitted and discharged to it was struck out. And then Magistrate Ture was reinstated, but he was moved from Banjul Magistrate Court to Mansakonko Magistrates Court.
Do you have a newspaper that says anything about his reinstatement?
Yes, there is a newspaper here where I did give it to the man. Yeah, this was one where he was reinstated, dated on the Thursday, the 25th of April.
Which newspaper are you referring to?
The Observer of 25th April 1996.
Could you produce that to the Commission? As the commissioners take a look at this document, perhaps I may ask a few questions concerning lawyer Osman Silla. Do you know whether he still practices law in this country?
Well, everybody knows what happened to lawyer Silla. He was shot by the junta. He nearly died. He was taken to Dakar for medical treatment, and he subsequently went to exile for a long time. And I don't think he's practicing now, because obviously that must have been a very traumatic experience. And you know, he was shot with a bullet. I think he was very lucky in the head. He was very lucky to be alive.
Do you by any chance recall when this event happened?
I cannot recall it off my head, but because I think when it happened, I had already gone to exile, I think.
And at this stage, Gambia must have moved from junta, from military junta to constitutional civilian rule.
Well, yeah, so-called constitutional. As far as I'm concerned, the Gambia never moved from a junta. I know you said there's a constitution, yeah, but they were supposedly on the constitutional rule.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chonga. We would now move on to what happened to your case subsequently. Remember, you have told us that you were acquitted and discharged of those charges that were before the magistrate, but you were to go back into detention because you were security detainees. What happened after that?
Well, no surprise. We were recharged again. And I think maybe I should have said the whole issue of acquit and discharge, obviously in law, is autre for acquit, autre for convict. You cannot bring the person back to be charged. But obviously, when they tampered with the judgment, changing it from acquit and discharge to struck out, then procedurally, you can be charged. So we have been recharged now again on the 23rd of April. And I have the newspaper here 23rd April 1996, we are recharged again.
Could you tell us which newspaper this was?
This was the Observer of 23rd April 1996.
Could you kindly read out the headline?
It says, former IGP and 2 others recharged just a few days after being acquitted by Turin. Did you see the language?
Who were the two others that are referred to in the newspaper?
Myself, Mr. Ebrima Chongan, and ASP Kebadiba.
Thank you very much. You would want to produce that to the Commission? Mr. Chairman, a commissioner wants to ask a question.
Mr. Chongan, I believe the changing of the decision from acquittal and discharging to stroke out was a calculated move, so as to give window where after a few hours or so you can be brought back again, because of the same manipulation that has been going on, dragging the case and keeping you in custody for 2.5 years. That's my conviction. I'm not sure whether I'm right.
You are absolutely right. That was why the Chief Justice had to make sure that if you look at the newspaper you have there, it says acquitted. That's why Al-Ghali manipulated the judgment so that they can give chance to the junta. You know, there was no rule of law anymore. Whatever the junta wanted, it happened.
Sorry, just a reminder to the commissioners to please announce your name. We need to be transcribing all of these things, and if the names are not announced, it might create confusion. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Secretary. I thought after announcing the name once, twice, do we have to do it every time?
Yes, please. You need to announce your name every time you talk for the transcribers.
Okay.
Council, you may proceed, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chongan, so on 23rd April 1996, you were recharged before a magistrate. Which magistrate was it this time?
This time we appeared before another Gambian magistrate called Yukasi Dabo, our 4th magistrate now for this case. And as expected, the same charges were reinstated. All three of us pleaded not guilty. And as usual, the prosecution applied for adjournment, and without any surprise, Magistrate Dabo swiftly granted the adjournment, you know, and it was clear now that this is nothing short of our conviction would get us out of this.
You said this was your 4th magistrate. So let's get it clear. The first was Onya, second Ogajafo, then 3rd Boriture, and then 4th Yukase Dabo, correct?
Correct.
On this occasion that you appeared before Mr. Yukase Dabo, did the prosecution offer any reasons for the adjournment sought?
No adjournment offered. But I think by this time, the new magistrate has got the signal. So he just granted the adjournment.
What happened to ASP Kebadiba subsequently?
Yes, ASP Kebadiba, subsequently he was sick, and he was taken to the hospital. He was diagnosed that with diabetes, and I'm quite sure it was the food condition in the prison. That is my opinion. And the prosecution team now has become very desperate, given the mounting pressure they were under to prove their case. So we became very suspicious when they came to Mile 2 prison and drove one of our colleagues, Chief Superintendent Sirif Mbai, to police headquarters. You know.
Do you know why he was taken there?
Well, we were suspicious now. They wanted to use him to testify before Pasala Jang. There was some misunderstanding before.
To testify before or against
To
Pasala
testify
Jang?
against Pasala Jang. That's what they wanted. But to Superintendent Sirif Mbai's credit, when he came back, he told us, and he categorically refused to cooperate.
To cooperate with who?
With Jawate and Fodebari.
Up to this stage, were you receiving visits from members of your family?
Yes, time to time. It depends on the tension, you know, time to time.
At this stage, 1996, were there, earlier on in your testimony, you mentioned that some politicians were also brought to Mile 2. Do you recall what happened to them?
Yes, I can remember in 12 July 1996, Lamin Saho, I think they call him Lamin Nafa Saho. He was a former minister of tourism. He was detained and brought to our wing, security wing number 4.
You mentioned O.J. Jallo the other day, yesterday. Did anything happen to him, as far as you know?
We did not see them, but I think there was a time they brought them at the security wing number, at the remand wing, you know, and we heard about it, yeah.
You told us earlier that the leader of the junta, Yaya Jammeh, was your neighbor. She used to come and eat from your house. Even after the coup, your wife would not believe that there was a coup because she said that if there was a coup, Yaya Jammeh would have told me. And do you know whether your wife had subsequently met Jammeh or seen Jammeh?
Yes, I can't remember when, but I think, yes. My wife, there was a time my wife went to Royal Victoria Hospital, and Jammeh was there on an unannounced visit, and he was coming in one corridor, and he saw my wife, and then he just turned and disappeared. But to his credit, he sent the ADC, who was Bajinka, I think, at the time, to call my wife to find out what happened, why is she at the airport, at the hospital, And my wife categorically said, well, you know what happened,
In June of 1996, you were still at Mile 2 prison, correct?
Yes.
Do you know an officer called Bainyas Ba?
Yes, I know Bainyas Ba. He was one of our officers responsible for one of the units, and I knew him very well. And there was a time when the changes happened, when they were taking the statements of the detainees. By that time, I was in security wing number 1. He came there asking for me, saying they're going to charge me treason, etc. So when they told me that, I was quite angry. But he was also subsequently detained at the Mile 2 prison in the remand wing. And he wrote me a very remorseful letter. Unfortunately, I lost the letter, but I had it at some point to ask for forgiveness, for ask for pardon. Yes.
Pardon for what? Forgiveness for what?
Well, when things have changed, because this was an officer, I think I even sent him to England to do some course and came back. But when things change, you know, this is the new dispensation. Now he was trying to prove to his new political masters that, you know, because some people just decided anybody who is more against Chongan, you know, then you will be in the good books of Jammeh. So he came to the prison asking for me, you know, that they will charge me, they will do this. So when I came, the guys told me that. I said, okay, fine. Then afterwards he was detained, and that's why he wrote me the letter.
Do you forgive him?
Yes, I forgive him.
And your trial continued, obviously. So tell us what happened on 17th June 1996. I'm referring specifically at paragraph 187 of your statement, page 59.
Yes, on this day, 17th June, our trial continued on a fortnightly basis, sort of. And each time we appear for a hearing, the same procedure would happen. I mean, the prosecution would apply for adjournment, the magistrate will note it through, duly comply, and then we go back to mile 2.
What do you mean by the magistrate nodding duly comply?
No, I mean the prosecution will come and apply for adjournment, and then the magistrate will grant them the adjournment. We are returned. I even remember there was an occasion the prosecution did not even turn up, and we still had an adjournment.
And during this period, these routine requests for adjournment and routine granting of the application for adjournment, did your counsel make a request for the case to be dropped?
Yeah, whenever they ask for adjournment, the counsel will naturally say we need to proceed, but the prosecution will say we are not ready. So, I mean, there's so much you can do.
So by this time, June 17, 1996, you would have been in detention for almost 23 months, and your trial would have been for almost 19 months.
Yes.
No single witness has been had in your case except for Mr. Cisse.
Yes, and also the documents he wanted to tender were dismissed, was not accepted, and the prosecution appealed to the High Court.
And as at this time, no single witness was had in the case against you?
Yes, never. No witness ever came.
And you were detained together. Well, your case was against 3 individuals, ASP Diba and Pa Salajani. What, if anything, happened to ASP Diba afterwards? You earlier testified that he was sick with diabetes. You may look at paragraph 188 of your statement if you need to.
Yes, I think ASP Kewadiba wasn't giving any food since the previous day when he returned from the hospital. You know, Kewadiba, when this diabetes thing, he was admitted to the hospital. And then I think there was an incident there, I can't remember. But so ASP Kebadiba hadn't been giving any food since the previous day because now he would need to have special dietary requirement because of the diabetes when he returned from the hospital. So we protested that we weren't going inside ourselves until he was provided with the food required. Now another prison officer, he was not very friendly, promised us that he was going to bring food for Diba. but he instead brought reinforcement of heavily armed soldiers to threaten us. So, I mean, these soldiers were our junior. We were not afraid of them. So we clearly explained to the soldiers our demand for ASP Kebadiba to be provided food he could eat as a diabetic. To Ndau's disappointment, the soldiers countenanced the demand, the soldiers countered and the demand and agreed to make sure that food was brought to Kebadiba.
And do you know whether subsequently the dietary requirements of Kebadiba were being met by the prison?
I'm not sure whether they have been met, but at least he will have food, because he will be allowed food now to come from his family to bring it to him.
But did he still remain at the security wing number 4 with you guys?
Yes, he was there at security wing number 4 with us.
You mentioned quite a number of guards who were responsible for your group. Did they remain the same throughout your detention at security wing number 4?
No. After that brief protest we did, 28th of June, 1996, the guards at the security wing were replaced. Our suspicion was that the reshuffling was occasioned by our little consensus protest on behalf of ASP Kebadiba. A new assistant prison officer, Famara Koli, was now assigned to our wing. Like a new broom, you have to understand prison. You know, you fight incrementally to have little, it's not even privileges, to have relaxation. And if there's a little turbulence, you go back to square one. So, like a new broom, hoping to sweep clean, and certainly empowered by hardline instructions from the junta, he immediately started reversing all the progress we had achieved to alleviate our poor detention conditions. He reintroduced searching, close monitoring of our activities. We were veterans and knew all the secrets of the prison establishment. To his chagrin, we fought back. The back and forth created tense animosity between us and the prison establishment. So we soon lodged a complaint to the Commissioner of Prison about the ill treatment we were receiving from some prison board officers, primarily this Famara Koli. So the Commissioner removed Koli from our wing, and he was replaced with Sergeant Bakari Bojang. Detainees in different security wings now were not allowed to mingle. You know, we have stayed very long in the prison until, if we are allowed, we are out on breaks, we can mingle with even the people in security wing number 1. But now this has been reversed, and so now the detainees in different security wings were not allowed. Famara Koli introduced that. So detainees in security were not allowed to mingle. But when another senior officer came, who was called Balajo, he was a good man, was transferred to take charge of both security wing number 1 and ours. Then he lifted that restriction.
Do you know the first name of Balaja?
Balajo, they used to call him APO Balajo at the time. Yeah, I'm quite sure if you inquire at the prison, they would know him.
Let me take you to 25th July, 1996.
Yes.
26 July 1996. This would have been the 2nd anniversary of your detention, correct?
Correct. This was the second anniversary of our detention, and you know, we would not celebrate, obviously, a milestone of being second year in prison. And you know, the junta and its minions have already made plans for us by way of appearing in court in our never-ending trial. So we made our symbolic appearance again before Magistrate Yukasi Dabo.
Why do you call it symbolic appearance?
Well, I mean, it's a foregone conclusion. We will just go, and then prosecution will apply for adjournment, and then it's granted, and we go back. Even though there's a good side effect to it, at least we will be able to see our relatives.
In paragraph 192 of your statement, you described it as such. That is the second part of paragraph 192, and I would read it, quote, "The prosecutor rendered his ritualistic application for an adjournment, and the magistrate religiously accepted it. Poor Mr. Dabo, I almost felt pity for him at the bench. The embarrassing expression on his countenance betrayed his inner discomfort for playing along with the prosecution against all ethics and norms of case law. The junta had emasculated the judiciary of its independence and negated its integrity in an all-out determination to stultify every branch and aspect of government to their whims," unquote. Did that capture what you were saying at the time when you appeared before Magistrate Dabo?
Yes, because I really pitied him. You know, by this time, you know, the junta are starting to permeate every branch of government. It's just not the judiciary. The security forces everywhere. And I agree with that summation. I wrote it, and I stand by it.
It's quite damning, isn't it?
Indeed.
Was it that bad, Mr. Chonga?
Well, Counsel, I mean, can you imagine a case going on for more than 1.5 years? Almost every year they're adjourning. Every 2 weeks they're adjourning. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I said, can you imagine a case for more than a year? Every time they're adjourning, this case was struck out. I mean, is that justice? Justice delayed is justice denied. I think, Counsel, you know this more than me.
Mr. Chonga, Counsel doesn't answer questions. But thank you very much for that answer. I mean, I asked those questions simply because I wanted the record to capture the seriousness of the problem that we were dealing with. One of our responsibilities is to identify how we got to where we were in December of 2016. These are the little baby steps that were occurring which led us to that place. So we need to identify them. But thank you very much for your answers, and thanks also for accommodating me when I ask questions that would elicit some obvious answers. Not that I don't know the answers, but the record must reflect the answers. My knowledge of them and keeping them in my head would not necessarily put them on the record. So I have to ask those questions, silly as they may appear sometimes, but they would elicit the information that is needed for the record. But thank you for indulging us, Mr. Chonga.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Kinte, you asked the name of the prison warden or prison officer. It's Kitabu Balajo. Maybe the records will want to have it. Kitabu Balajo.
Thank you for that indication. You may continue, Counsel. Oh, sorry. Yes, Mustafa Carr, Commissioner Carr.
Commissioner Carr, I have a question. You maintain that Dr. Lamin Saho was brought in to the same security wing you were in, and that was the second time a civilian was brought to that wing. Was there any difference between the treatment that civilians like him received and you?
Not that much. He was able to get his food, but I think he must have got a medical condition. So he was able to get food from home every day. And I think it's good you even asked this question. And we are all crashing. Sometimes we go and crash for the crumbs, you know. Yes.
Counsel, you may continue, please.
Thank you. Mr. Chongan, you continued your regular journey to the court for Mr. Magistrate, Mr. Yukase Dabo. So tell us what happened 27 August 1996.
Yeah, 27 August 1996, we appeared once again before Magistrate Yukase Dabo. Some of my family members in Senegal traveled down to see me at this hearing, and other family members in the country who hadn't had the opportunity to attend previous hearings also came. They were all happy to see me, and I was holding up in remarkable spirit.
Did any senior officials attend that hearing?
Yes, this day it was unusual. This case, the notorious ASP Lamin Jabate did not come up. This time the Director of Public Prosecutions showed up for the prosecution.
I noticed you called Mr. Jabate notorious. What was he notorious for at this time?
Well, he was a nightmare to us. You know that. Sorry, Counsel, you know, as far as it's my belief that he did not treat us fairly.
And this time round, which senior official appeared?
The Director of Public Prosecution showed up for the prosecution, and we thought that the Director was either going to file a motion of nolle prosequi, annulment of the prosecution, or add more charges to the charge sheet. But when neither of those happened, we became a bit concerned about the change of prosecutors at this stage in the trial. Well, not much happened in this hearing as well.
Did the new prosecutor, that is the DPP, did he proceed with the case?
No, he didn't proceed. He just made an application for adjournment, and as expected, the magistrate upheld the application, and we were driven back to mile 2. But that day I received 2 books from my classmate, Mr. Ibu Gibbs, who is in Canada. He was my former classmate in Gambia High School, and I was really touched by it that friends like him went out of their way to send me gifts in prison without fear of what the ruling council might do to them. Nothing was more precious in prison than reading materials, because in prison you don't have a big space, but you have a lot of time. So reading with a book, it's quite stimulating.
Were books readily available?
Yes, in the latter end, when we were in security wing number 4, yes, in the latter end.
How about when you were in security wing number 1?
No, there was no books available. We would just read the cover of the Dettol soap, to read the writings there to know, so that just to fill our mind.
During that time, you had the privilege of receiving 2 books. In your earlier testimony, you said you received 1 book from your sister and another, The Economist. Could you clarify that?
No. We had the Bible, and then afterwards the Quran. That was after we pleaded with Thomas Jajo. So he gave us a Bible, and all of us are Muslim. But anyway, we read it, and I was really struck by the story of Job in the Bible.
Tell us about it.
Well, I think the pastor will know it more than me. So
the pastor is not testifying, Mr.
Yeah,
Chonga.
because I think Job was a guy who had everything, and then he lost everything. And I was here, you know, in the doldrums, and it gave me some hope, you know, that these things, they do happen in life. It was very humbling. And then after we have the Quran and started learning to read the Quran until we became very conversant with the Quran.
The story of Job resonated with your situation. That's what you're telling us.
I didn't say that. I just said that it was very humbling.
Did the prison have a library?
I don't know. I can't remember, to be honest. They might, but I don't know. I can't remember.
But if it did, you never had access to books from it?
Yes. After when detention subsidized, we started receiving books, people sending us books, and we are reading. Yeah.
In your earlier testimony, okay, after receiving the Bible, first the Bible, and then the Holy Quran, you were lucky to receive a book. You received the Economist newspaper, that is the story of Gilas. Tell us about that.
No, in prison, I received the book of, there was a soldier called Madikefal. You know, the soldiers would escort Thomas to our private security wing. And I remember one day he just surreptitiously dropped a book. And the book was about Islamic things. And then I picked it, I read it, and then I shouted to Muhammad Betty, it was his Captain Cham, that, oh, we've got a book, and it's about Islamic stuff and so on. So when I read and we exchange.
Thank you very much for that. So now, as at 27th of August, 1996, the DPP took over the case from ASP Jobate. That's what you said, right?
Yeah, for that day.
Was it just for that day or for the continuation of the process?
No, I think it was for that day because I can't remember him turning up again.
You told us that while in detention, other people were brought, such as Harry Valentine and Usman Baji. Do you recall what happened to those people?
On the 28th of October 1996, more detainees were released.
Could you tell us their names, please, those you can remember?
Okay. We woke up the morning, hold on. Yeah, out of the 18 remaining detainees in our wing, 11 were named for immediate release. This was Captain Mama Cham, my good friend, Sirif Gomez, were on the list. The free detainees also included Captain Marong, if you remember who I said advised the junta members not to summarily execute people in the alleged November 11 thing. ASP Harry Valentine, Lieutenant Usman Baji, the Baji you mentioned earlier on, who would later become a minister, and Corporal Lama Bari. By this time, I was very, very close to Sirif. He was my buddy. You know, we were the small rebels in the prison. So, you know, he shed tears when he was going out, realizing that because that I was not part of the list. And now, only 4 of us are remaining in the security wing, which was full. Now, only 4 of us were remaining. Pasala Jan, SP Keba Diba, Captain Ebrima Kambi, and Corporal Alaji Kebe. So now it's only the 4 of us remaining on the whole of security wing number 4.
At this stage, what has happened to the case of Ebrima Kambi. He was to be court-martialed together with Captain Major Malik Njai. What happened to their case?
No, the court-martial was dropped, like Malik Njai and others, but he was still there, detained illegally.
In the meantime, Major Njai was released as part of those released for Tobaski.
Yes, Major Njai and Couple Mbalo say they can, yeah.
So Kambi was still in detention at this time, with no pending charge.
Correct.
In November 1996, 1st November 1996, do you recall what happened in Gambia? Or do you recall the event of the imams paying a courtesy call to the president?
Yes, I remember that, we had over Radio Gambia, because remember by this time now we are prison veterans. We've managed to get some small transistor radios which we hide and which we, so that we'll be able to listen. And we had over Radio Gambia that a delegation of imams paid a courtesy call on President Jammeh at State House to appeal for the release of detainees. According to the news report, Jammeh asked the imams to speak to the detainees to give a firm commitment that they would be law-abiding if he released them. As soon as the imam were able to secure that commitment from the detainees, he was reported to have said he wouldn't hesitate to release all of them. But we were puzzled as to whom he was referring to, since there were civilian detainees at Fajara barracks. For our part, we wondered what promise we could give the imams, since we neither committed any offense to justify our detention nor were bent on causing any trouble. After the highly publicized news report, we waited for the arrival of imams, but none showed up at Mile 2 prison. So maybe it was for the civilian detainees who were in Fajara barracks. But it was also difficult. So no imam turned up.
At this stage, November 1996, was Jammeh president or he was still head of the junta? I'm not too clear about that.
I don't remember, but I know this was the tail end of the transition. I don't think the new constitution came into effect, but I think it was just about to come into effect, the 1997 constitution.
I think, anyway, I cannot testify, obviously. But at some stage, we'll need to clarify this. What was Jammeh's position? Was he still head of AFPRC, or was he now head of APRC and became president? So we would look into that at some stage. But as far as you recall, none of the imams showed up at Mile 2 prison seeking to secure your commitment to not causing trouble.
Correct. Absolutely.
And you continued to be detained until, I rephrase that question. You said the new constitution came into effect. Do you recall exactly when it came into force? Not necessarily the exact date, but around what time?
To be honest, did I mention it in my?
No.
No. To be honest, I can't. On the top of my head.
But could you tell us what was the politics that surrounded the suspended constitution at this time, end of November 1996, excuse me?
I know, I can't remember the dates now, but we have a transitional period, and then we had this election, and then Jammeh supposedly won, and we had this new constitution. And obviously, if they swear him under the new constitution, then the Second Republic will start. And obviously, then now habeas corpus and other stuff would be able, our lawyers will be able to go to court and say that now, and the degrees would be nullified, except the bit they did. So, once the constitution comes into force, our lawyers would simply go and apply for habeas corpus to get us released, because now we will be under constitutional order instead of military degrees.
The new constitution, of course, in November, you will recall, or thereabout, in 1996, towards the end, there was a referendum on the new constitution. Do you recall that?
Yes, in order for the Second Republic to come, there must be a referendum. So there was a referendum to usher in the Second Republic, the 1997 constitution.
You have talked about habeas corpus in the new constitution. So your suggestion, correct me if I'm wrong, you're suggesting that the new constitution would have restored your rights as detainees, and therefore your lawyers would be able to make an application for habeas corpus, which would be a very good basis for your release from detention. Is that what you are telling us?
Yes, because this time Jammeh would be trying to portray himself as a Democrat, and also, we would be able to continue, but we should be able to request, because we were the only 4 people remaining there.
And do you recall the events of 3rd February 1997?
Yes, 3rd February 1997 was just like another day. We wake up in the morning and we do our normal prison stuff. And then suddenly this ASP Kitabo Balajo came around 5 p.m. and told me, "Boss, pack your stuff." So I was released, myself, Press Jan, Captain Kambi, but unfortunately, Kopul Kebe was not released, so he continued to be detained. So we rushed to the prison headquarters, and I requested for a telephone. So I telephoned my dad to tell him it's me, but he just couldn't understand. I say, it's me, but I think because I've been away for a long time. But luckily, Uncle Abdunjai, who was once the governor of the bank, was there, because Uncle Abdu's wife and my stepmother, they are sisters. So he took the phone, and I said, it's me, it's Pa Chongan. He said, oh, yes. Then he understood. So I think the army came there, or some vehicles, or to give us lift or something like that. I refused. So I went with a taxi, and then I went to Old Cape Road, Cape Point, and then I had a good swim. So I went to, I think it was St. Mary's Food and Wine. There was a supermarket there. So I went and bought some chocolate for my daughter. And now I took another taxi, and I went home, and everybody was there. But what was quite remarkable, I just got out of the car, and I saw Lieutenant Bajinko, I don't know, he was a captain, and ASP Harry Valentine, and they were just laughing. They say, "Sir, guard of honor ready for your inspection." So we just laughed it off, and then I went to the house, and our house was full of people all night. So freedom at last. But it was not total freedom. It was a conditional release because the case is still hanging.
How did you feel the first time you heard the words, "Boss, pack your stuff"?
I was elated with joy. All my towel, everything, I just gave it to the prisoners and just run. I just wanted to get out. But I think also I need to say something here, because normally the drill is when you are released, you are taken before Yaya Jammeh, and he will sit in his place, turn his chair, and say, "You know what you have done, blah, blah, blah," and you keep quiet. But in my case, he never requested I appear before him. And I would have wished to face him, but he never And he knew what I was going to tell him. So probably maybe he didn't want me to go back to prison. So I just went home. Yeah.
Did any person suggest to you that you should meet him?
Of course, laterwards, people tried to tell me, because that time the drill was, if you are released, you go and write a letter and say thank you for releasing me. And I will tell you, the majority of the detainees did that. They afterwards left and met him, but I refused. I never ever wrote him a letter or anything.
For how long were you detained?
Well, I was detained for 2.5 years, for almost 30 months, July to February, yeah. Without trial. Well, there was the magistrate court, but without no reason or no justification.
Mr. Chairman, at this stage, I have only a few things to cover with regards to the rest of his trial. And after that, I would go into issues about the lessons learned, what he can tell us based on his experience that would benefit institutional reform, and the formal issues about how he feels now after having been given the opportunity to state his case to the Gambian people, and also what he thinks, or what are his views about forgiveness and reconciliation. And that would bring us to the end of his testimony. So I thought that perhaps this would be a convenient time to take an early lunch break, and then we come back at a point that at a time that you appoint, you decide, and then we would finish in the last session of the day with this witness, so that tomorrow we start with a new witness. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Counsel. We have 12 minutes to go. If the commissioners don't mind, if they have any questions to ask of the witness, we can still be around for the 12 minutes. If you don't mind that, we would do that. Commissioner Samba, you have the floor.
I am Commissioner Samba. Mr. Chongan, with all these two years you spent in the prisons, I didn't heard of you saying that they allowed you to pray. Did they allow you people to be praying your 5 daily prayers?
Yes, they allowed us to pray our daily prayers, and also Ramadan we fast, and we eat the same food. So, yeah.
Thank you. Any other question from any commissioner? Mr. Chongan, I'm happy that I did not hear Quranic or biblical phrases from you when you said that you were given the Bible and the Quran. Those were the only books that you had. I just want to tell you Vignetta's story of Chief MKO Abiola, who was thrown in jail by Babangida for 2.5 years or 2 years. He was in solitary confinement and was given only the Bible and the Quran. When Sani Abacha died, I went with the Secretary General for a short visit there, and we were taken in the middle of the night, the two of us, to go meet Abiola. Abiola was not told whom he was meeting. He came in there, he was looking at Kofi Annan, and he said, "Who are you? I seem to recognize your face." Annan wouldn't tell him first who he was. He was more concerned about his health. So he then started talking. When he told us that he had only the Bible and the Quran, it became clear to us that he was speaking with phrases from the two books, the two holy books. So I was a bit worried that we might be hearing you speaking in Quranic and biblical terms, but I haven't detected anything yet from that. But anyway, thank you so much for this session. And if there isn't any other question, Council, we will suspend the meeting for 30 minutes. And those who would want to have lunch, you go and help yourself. And those who are fasting, you continue fasting and praying for us. But anyway, thank you so much. So we break for, is it 1 hour?
Yeah, 1 hour.
I was giving you only 30 minutes to eat. But so we come back in an hour's time for the last session. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.